5 minutes? Okay, it started. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see all your smiling faces. Just wondering why you're all concentrated around here and you're not spread out. Hi, my name is Michelle Simmons-Sappho. I'm the councillor for Seven Sisters Ward, and I'm also the chair of this committee. I'll just go through the businesses as welcome to this meeting, the Climate, Community Safety and Culture Scrutiny Panel. We have a cabinet members present today, as well as a number of senior officers. If any virtual attendees wish to speak, because I can observe there are two, they should indicate this with the yellow hand icon, and we will pick this up in the meeting. The meeting is also being streamed live and recorded by the council for subsequent broadcast via the council internet site. Can members introduce themselves and the cabinet members state their portfolio area? Can any other speakers, when they're about to speak, kindly introduce themselves when speaking? Can I ask that we keep to the timings and that we are as efficient as possible? Can I also remind officers to keep their introduction reports as well as their responses to questions as brief as possible, because we don't want to be here until midnight, so we can focus on the questions. Thank you all, and just to note that we will be bringing forward item 8 on the community safety and hate crime strategy in the interest of time.
We'll also be bringing the Docklands bikes.
And we'll also be bringing the Docklands bikes
Item forward
as well. So just be mindful of that. Is there any apologies for absence? Because I do not have, we have received apologies from Councillor Crawley Harrison. Urgent business, there's no urgent business for this meeting. And any declarations of interest? Does anyone have any declarations of interest? Silent means no. So thank you. Deputations. There have been no deputations, petitions or presentations or questions received. Can we look at the minutes for the last? Are the minutes of the previous meeting on the 19th of December agreed? Okay, agreed. Okay, thank you. Can the officer presenting now introduce themselves? That's community safety and hate crime, pages 17 to 30. And can the officer presenting now introduce themselves and introduce the items?
Thanks, Chair. And
thank you, Adam.
Good to see everybody. Adam Jogi, Community Safety and Cohesion Cabinet Member. Conscious that colleagues will have already read the papers, I thought I'd just give a very brief introduction, then we can go straight to questions, because these folks have spent the last 18 months working very hard, and I know that we'll all have given them the respect of reading the papers. So this is a very important set of documents, two documents. Thank you for allowing us to bring it to this meeting rather than the previous one, on the basis that we wanted to maximise involvement of all concerned parties and people and stakeholders. We've done that. This is a big piece of work, as I say, and a big thanks particularly to Heather and Joe, who are both here, for the work they've done working with you, but to make sure we got to the place we are today. One thing that I think is really important is this has been a very good example of joint up work across the council with various departments, whether it was working on violence against women and that important element of the responsibility with Lucia Das-Neves and her team, to making sure that we were reaching out to education and the youth service as well. I'm very pleased that more than 1,000 local people responded to the engagement exercises, the consultation, and generally helped influence what is a framework for the next 3 years of how we keep the community safe. The police, of course, have to sign up to it too, so it's a joint stakeholder document, as it were, and the themes and aims are clearly set out in the document, in the papers, so you'll know those. I don't want to waste time repeating them, but I do want to say that this is an important opportunity to make sure we bring the various strands together to move Harrogate in the right direction. And I should also just say that we're at Scrutiny today. The hate crime strategy particularly doesn't have to go to full council for ratification or indeed approval, but it will be going for noting because I think these two documents together, both strategies, are an important double act, for want of a better description, to make sure that we are tapping into addressing and working on all the issues that people care about and set out when they responded to the consultation. So I'll leave it there and go to questions.
Do you have any questions? I see you looking at me. Councillor Ali, please go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor, for the report. Just two sort of broader questions. Obviously, I welcome this, and I think it's really quite welcome to see the sort of the evidence basis for the types of engagement you've had and how that's gone. I think that detail's always been lacking in the past when we've had these kind of strategies. So I think it's good to see the types of engagements that you had, the types of people you've met. That's really quite a positive welcome. So I really want to sort of thank the team for that. I think going forward, again, there's broader questions that I had. One was in terms of trying to encourage those communities to report that traditionally don't have a culture of reporting. So, there are other communities where there's been a long campaign. I mean, for example, we know the CFT are really great, working in the Jewish community and really promoting the importance of reporting anti-Semitic sort of incidences. And I think that's why we've got good data basically, and we know where the issues are. I think that there might be other communities where there isn't that kind of sort of infrastructure. So what kind of, methods or strategies can we employ going forward, or does a strategy sort of touch on that? And the second question you touched on a little bit was regarding the police. Obviously, my long-standing gripe has always been that I don't think that all sections of the police value all hate crimes equally. And I think that's something that we need to sort of push back on. And I think it'd be good to see what conversations you might have had or the team have had with the police in terms of like confidence. Why should community members report if they feel that the police haven't got a tradition or a culture of accepting all hate crime as equal? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just say a couple of things, and then if others want to come in, they can. Three important questions. Yes, totally agree. The engagement was important, and it was new, and it was thorough, and it was comprehensive. And I went to a number of the sessions from libraries to Dunn's Bakery. Well, I didn't go to Dunn's Bakery. I noticed that the invitation didn't come my way, but we made a real effort to challenge some of the default practices and to really make sure we reach out to as many people as possible. So I welcome your acknowledgement of that. Reporting is a very important point, and it's one that we touched on in the meeting earlier today. I think the most relevant answer here is the important role that councillors have in helping make this case to people. As political leaders in our communities, councillors, whether you're here, Birmingham, Manchester, wherever you are in the country, have a responsibility to be that centre and focal point of making that case and encouraging people to do that. We will be having conversations in the coming weeks about how we can make sure we get to a place where our element of making the reporting point is as effective as possible. And I can tell by your question you'd be keen to get involved in that, so we will come back to you. I think the important thing is, it's less. This is not about we have the answers, we have the strategy. This is about a lived document that responds to and engages with people's changing demands and needs. So I don't want to say we're sitting here going to X, Y, and Z. We're sitting here, we know what the problem is, people have shared their concerns, and we're going to then spend the next 3 years, once this document's approved at full council, to make sure, well, some people may be spending the next 3 years, some may not be, but we'll be using that time to make sure that we are developing the kind of strategy to which you refer. But be under no illusions, reporting is a clear priority. Not only is that able to attract funding and support to tackle some of these issues, it raises awareness, but it also challenges stigma and stereotypes, which we both know personally can be very difficult indeed. So that's on reporting. And lastly, about engagement with the police, I think our role is as a critical friend. The police have an incredibly important role in working with the council to keep our community safe. Any community anywhere, they are public servants who, in many cases go above and beyond. And I think it's important that we have that honest, open engagement with them at the highest levels. And that again underpins some of the approach we're taking to using this document to move forward. So the points you've all raised, Councillor, almost like you were a fly on the wall of the meeting we had earlier today, are bang on and informing what we're doing and how we plan to move forward.
On virtually, we have Councillor Amadou, who would like to answer a question. So can you kindly talk? You've got your... Okay, so...
Hi, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody involved with this. This report. It seems it's very good. And thank you to you, Adam, and the officers for all your hard work. I'd just like to ask one question, if I may. How are you going to, in the future, monitor this report? Are you going to have some chance to revisit, if you like, and see how successful it's been, or if there is any little amendments or changes you want to make? Thank you.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Joe Bemmer. I'm the strategic lead for integrated offender management. In answer to that question, Councillor, there will be an action plan that will be developed that will sit behind the strategy. This will be a co-produced action plan with all the stakeholders and partners. It will be reviewed annually at the Community Safety Partnership Board, which Councillor Jogi is co-chair of.
And just to echo that point, Councillor, I think the value of making sure that backbenchers or scrutiny committee members like you can help ask the right questions, probe us for the various briefings that may be of interest, and engage, as you've done, Gina, for more than 30 years, to make sure that we get this right. So there will be, as Joe says, not just the action plan, but the opportunities for councillors to feed in, to shape what that looks like and how it addresses the issues that people care about and want to see progress made on. And thank you for your comments and acknowledgement of the hard work of the team.
I have some questions myself. Can I refer you to page 28 of the document? I'd like to ask a question about recurring crime in hotspots that are clearly in Haringey, especially I'm the ward councillor for Seven Sisters Ward. There's perpetual crime around N15, around Seven Sisters, around Plevna Crescent and Stonebridge Road. They have recurring crime that every time I go to my surgery, there's something. I wouldn't want to know, how are you going, it's not here, but I'm going to, because there are questions here, but this is the one question I want to ask about the visibility of the police and their ability to tackle that recurring crimes that are perpetually happening in the hotspots in Haringey.
Thank you for your question.
That's one question, and then I'll ask you the other ones.
Sure. I used to chair this committee, so I well know the prerogatives of the chair. Important question. I think it's less about the specifics of your example, although I'd like you to follow up with the team so we can make sure that's looked into and we can talk to the relevant officers. I think there's a wider point of recognising that ultimately the police have a responsibility to make sure that they keep our community safe and tackle the crime that does in some cases impact, as all crime would, negatively, but in the particular case you've used. And I see Councillor Dunstall looking at me because he raised a similar issue about repeated occurrences of crime. The biggest point is we need to make sure that we let the police know where things happen, and we as community leaders in our own right as councillors hold them to account to make sure that those issues get looked into. There is of course a role for council officers to make sure that that middle, think of the Milky Way crispy roll, the soft centre that keeps it together. There's a role for the officers to make sure that those conversations and experiences are heard and shared. But ultimately, it's not a committee to be political on, but making sure that the police have the resources that they need to keep people safe is a very important one. That's a wider macro political issue that none of us around this table will be able to influence directly ourselves, but making sure that there is a proper, meaningful police provision in communities. We've heard from the Met Commissioner that he plans, or he's in the process of rolling out a new plan for London, which is looking at restoring, to a degree, neighbourhood policing. So that's an important part of it. But making sure that you raise this in the right way, go to your neighbourhood panel meetings. They should be your best friends. You should be emailing them constantly, because none of the people around this room are able to individually tackle a crime. What we can do is make sure we convene all the people who can help make that happen.
I'm going to push back on that again, because what is the overall strategy about handling the hotspots of crime within Haringey?
That's a slightly different question to the first one, which was what are we doing to make sure that we tackle crime?
Maybe I didn't phrase it properly.
No, it's fine. But making sure that we, ultimately, Chair, it's for the police to tackle crime. So one thing that I think is really important for us is to acknowledge and identify the people who are responsible, people, agencies, stakeholders who are responsible for different things. So the council will have a role, of course, in making sure that we do the joint up thinking, we raise the issues, we provide that convening power. We have, and I say we collectively, from the leader, chief executive down, regular meetings with the police, which is looking at making sure that they are tapping into and addressing the issues people raise. So the biggest thing for you strategy-wise is to make sure you feed into the food chain or up the food chain, as it were.
But we do, and we can't see no effective change. The things keep happening. We do go to the neighbour, myself and Barbara. I mean, we can take this out of here.
I think if it's a ward issue, it's probably better.
Yeah, I think we take that out.
The strategy point, though, is making sure that all the players who can help keep community safe are at the table. And this strategy sets the macro direction. The action plan that Joe referred to will set the identifiable points along that journey, for want of a better description.
Okay.
And the ultimate point is councillors will, well, you know, whoever's in this particular role, but I suspect whoever is the cabinet member for community safety will be making sure that councillors play that role as and when to make sure that all the points you've raised quite legitimately by keeping your people safe are addressed and dealt with properly.
The other thing that I'd like to draw your attention to on page 28 is how do we ensure that we hold the police to account on how they will deliver their new Met for London plan to address the findings of the Casey review?
Well, as I already indicated before, seeing that very helpful prompt on page 28 about the new Met London plan, the power and benefit of making sure all the key players around the table allow us to make those points. We're not here to defend or excuse other agencies. We're there to be critical friends, as I said at the beginning of my remarks, and making sure that the police understand our priorities as the council and as people and as residents and as taxpayers influences how they address the various points. Now, of course, there'll be individual instances of crime they have to respond to, which you can't, you know, get in the way of or influence per se when a crime takes place. It's dealt with. But the wider approach to tackling themes and trends, as you've referred to, is important. And the best way to do that, in my view and in our view, and actually many of the people who responded to the consultations and engagements, is to make sure, as I say, everyone who can influence things is at the table. We've got, at the highest levels, as I said in my first answer, engagement with senior Metropolitan Police officers. The leader has quarterly meetings with the commissioner, so at the very top, what's happening in Harrogate is being made clear. Hubert has the borough commander on speed dial, I suspect. If she doesn't, she has you on speed dial, which also illustrates the closeness of that and the importance of the closeness of that relationship. But, you know, let's be very, very clear. This is not about providing cover. We will ask the hard questions and we'll make the points as strongly as necessary to keep people safe. And that is our role as elected leaders, and we've all got responsibility in that. So and I think of the Stroud Green example, there's frustrations that things haven't been dealt with properly or effectively. We need to make sure that that's passed back to people who can really influence, who can help us increase presence or numbers if there's a particular challenge to deal with. And it's also important to make sure it's not just about holding the Met to account singly, but the secondary element is all the agencies joint up too, because there's, you know, there can be whether it's support for drug uses or abuse, whether it's alcohol support, and so there's all these elements which come together which can help us tackle these things. So the ultimate point is, and Brian's nodding with the ASB hat on, that is a particularly important part of that, because that can trigger a whole heap of domino effects. So how do we do that? We make sure we're in the room having the right conversations and building the links and communications necessary to make sure that our voices are heard.
Thank you very much, Adam. That's been really helpful to hear all the nuts and bolts of the operations. I've only got one more question, but can I just ask this? The first, also on the page 28, I'm just thinking about the outreach strategy, because it says, based on the equality data we have gathered, how do we encourage and embed proactive engagement with seldom heard community corporately, not just a community safety? So I'm just thinking about what nuts and bolts are we doing to ensure that? Is there an outreach element? What are we? How are we engaging with the community? You know, what focus groups, etc.
Sure. One of the best things about this particular piece of work and watching the team roll it out is the thorough, genuine, real approach taken to making sure local people's voices are heard. And I think actually I've been on the council 10 years in a few weeks, and this is probably the best example that I've seen of making sure that everybody who you want to have their say does so. And I think that is generally to be commended. I think your question is a little less focused on the particular issues before us and the wider point, which feeds into the leaders' very important approach of, or mission, I should say, of collaboration and co-production, and making sure that everyone who should and can influence things and needs to influence things is able to. And I would just refer you to the feedback report. I'm not sure what number it would be in your pack, but if you were to look at the feedback report for the draft community safety strategy and the hate crime strategy, it'll set out very clearly what happened when, who we spoke to, the number of people who attended each and every consultation. That would be on table A. I've got my glasses on and my bag's closed, but you will see I hope this is the best example to put to you as an answer, which shows the wide-ranging organisations, peoples and communities that contributed to these strategies. I made a point of having, it's the appendix, is it? We can make sure it's recirculated if you haven't got it, but it's table A, very detailed.
It's not in the pack.
It's not in the pack. It must be in the appendix to the papers, is it? Table A.
Table A.
In the feedback report for the. We can have it circulated.
Yeah, thank you very much, Adam. That would be very helpful because
or recirculated. And just to say, I made a point of ensuring that that there were at least 3 or 4 opportunities for councillors, particularly, to feed into this. I kept a list of each of the sessions which councillors turned up, so they will be getting Christmas cards or not. But on the basis that I knew some people would start saying things and I could gently point out that they weren't there. But you will be very well behaved this evening. But in all seriousness, your question, what are we doing? This is the best example of what's been done and what can be done. And those guys have done it.
Thank you very much, Adam. I think there's one last question from Councillor Dunstall.
Yeah, thank you. There's a couple of points, and I think you sort of alluded to some of this. A couple of points in here about trust and confidence. Just broadly, well, in the presentation, it's mentioned on slide 27, Cabinet Report, Key Evaluation Themes. But it's mentioned elsewhere a couple of points about trust and confidence, both in the police and council, which is obviously an issue across a number of areas, but also particularly low in a police context at the moment. But I would say that as a council, there's also an issue there. I just wonder whether you could speak to what some of the plans are and how that, I think issues in other areas of people's engagement with the council lower trust across the whole breadth, don't they? So what might start as a housing related issue becomes a bin related issue when the bins don't get collected and the whole thing is undermined. So it was mentioned that this had touch points with a range of other departments across the council. Just wondered if you could speak to some of that.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think there's 2 ways to answer this. Firstly, the police element perhaps is the best initial point to raise. As you'll see from the information contained in the strategy papers, and also if you have enough time when Franklin's sleeping to read the Community Safety Partnership minutes, you'll see that trust and confidence is an issue that we talk about often, particularly when you look at the diversity of the community and making sure that people who come from here, there and everywhere should feel safe and secure, and also feel that the agencies who are there to serve them are able to protect them. The Met Commissioner, as I said earlier, launched his new plan, which is all about tackling, not all about, I shouldn't say that, is in part about making sure that trust and confidence as a challenge for the Met is dealt with. We've obviously fed into that in our engagement kind of politically with other neighbours, but also on a leadership basis with the leader and the commissioner directly, and also some of his deputies and assistant commissioners. But you know, when you think about the history of this community and some of the challenges that people have gone through and seen, walking in anybody's shoes, whoever they are, wherever they're from, whatever they look like, trust and confidence will be a thing. It's something that we acknowledge. It's something that the police have heard loud and clear for many of the conversations that people have with them. And it is something that we, as I said initially, this strategy is not meant to have answers. It's meant to help give us the framework to tackle some of these things. So through the, assuming all members vote for it when it goes to full council, that framework will allow us to really drill down on some of these points and have the weight behind it of all the people who voted for it in council to make those points that people can help address it. The wider point about council services and trust, well, I do gently note that the deputy leader of the council, who's far more important than me, is sitting across the way, and so he may have and he will of course, sorry Mike, but he will of course transcend every area of the council as he works with the leader to get things done for people. So he may want to say something, but you'll know, councillor, from the conversations that you have as a ward councillor, that there's a real focus to make sure people feel that the authorities working in their interests. A lot of work to do. There'll be many years where that wasn't happening. There's a recognition now that it needs to happen, and I think it is starting to happen. So you're right, you can't also at the same time walk away from the interconnected nature of being frustrated with one element of a public services for which you pay your tax with respect to service and how that follows through. We will do the bit that we can, and it's making sure that all of that stuff's joined up.
Thank you very much. Is there any more questions? Ian, please go ahead.
Just a quick point. On reporting, I think what the aspect of reporting that I would like to stress is the uncertainty that a lot of pretty well-informed residents experience in knowing what is the best way to report something. How should I do it, and to whom should I do it? At what point does an ASB issue become a council issue or a police issue? Where's the dividing line, or should I report it to both? And if I do, what's the best way of doing it? This is something which comes up again and again at meetings which I chair, and there never seems to be really a really clear, standard, permanent answer to that. It seems to be, we get answers, but it seems to vary a little bit depending on who you speak to. So I think greater clarity on that is really important, because it is important that all of those incidents do get recorded, because unless the police and the council know where it's happening, when it's happening, they can't actually deal with it. And if it's too difficult to report something, people just don't bother.
Yes, I know from another part of my life where there's a particular local issue that's causing a lot of harm to people. Under-reporting or reporting fatigue is a better way of putting it, becomes a real thing. And as I touched on in my initial answer to Councillor Ali, the stereotypes and stigma and obstacles and barriers that some people feel to having their say, or knowing how to have their say, or even whether they feel they're going to be listened to or not, because that's also part of the challenge. What on earth's the point of me saying something if all you're going to do is ignore me or say see you later? So that challenge is as important as who should I write to. As I said, the community safety strategy is up for if I say up for renewal, that's not the best way to put it. It is set, designed and delivered every 3 years. So I can't think who had this role 3 years ago, maybe one of the independents, but before they left. But yes, it was, wasn't it? Yeah. So I can't speak to I obviously wasn't as involved then as I am now in this, or have been in this, but the framework that this will provide us will give us a good opportunity to make sure that finally we can get the reporting challenge dealt with. I can't speak for why others didn't do that previously, but we heard loud and clear that point from people, and it's now making sure we then build on that and start seeing some progress. So that's a half answer. We're saying, yeah, get it. And now we've got the opportunity to try and make something happen.
Thank you, Ian Sygrave. Councillor Ali, is this a quick one?
It's a very quick one to say that one thing I actually did want to raise was the idea of third-party reporting. And I do think that is not the silver bullet, but it's basically a means in which those communities that are seldomly heard or those in a traditional report can sort of report. But is there a focus on this going forward in terms of that third-party reporting? For example, I remember when I used to in South London, there was this whole thing since the UK and safe spaces, sort of local takeaway shops and hair, barber shops, that kind of thing. Maybe something similar in Haringey, third-party reporting centres, places people can go, pretty trusted, that kind of thing in the community. Would be great to see. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry you lived in South London. I think North in every context is best, but
born and bred, very proud.
But yeah, no one's beyond redemption. But yes, as you can see from the nods from my colleagues, what I have taken away, Councillor Ali, both from your second round of questioning and your first, is an interest from you to help shape some of this reporting angle. So I shall take your request on eagerly, and conscious we're going into pre-election period now, but I will speak to the team and see how we can provide a structure through which people can influence what that particular element of the strategy looks like. But in the meantime, I look forward to your support for the two strategies at full council.
Thank you. Can I move on to the recommendations then? Can we agree the recommendations, which are on page 2 of page 4, which reads, the Scrutiny Board note the contents of the accompanying presentation, which highlights the key findings from the community safety and hate crime public engagement and consultation that took place in 2023, that the board note the next steps, including cabinet approval, to take the community safety trust strategy to the full council for approval in March 2024. So can we agree those recommendations, please? Thank you. Right. We were going to do the dockless bikes. Yeah, that was according to the agenda. That's fine. So we can do the dockless bikes now. Thank you. Yes, please, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So the report that you have is an update on the rollout of the dockless bike schemes, which were approved. So these were approved by Cabinet, and we are now going into formal agreements with the providers, the two providers, Forest and Lime, and this is part of the administration's wider ambition and programme to facilitate a mode shift in transport. So from a car-based transport to a active travel and sustainable travel to address obviously climate change and the impacts of climate change, but also active health and well-being of our residents. And we can't affect a mode shift without actually giving those options. So we can talk about it as much as we like, but unless you've got options out there in which to actually make a choice about how you travel about. And, we've seen sort of globally e-bikes become, something of a real invitation to people that wouldn't necessarily get on a bike, frankly. And obviously we have a borough in two halves, one half very hilly, one half relatively flat. To get people in Muswell Hill and those sort of areas on bikes is a tough ask. But once they're on an e-bike, it essentially levels that playing field. So there are multiple benefits of this. And I think, so we are at a turning point now. The schemes have not yet gone live, so the launch hasn't happened yet. But in the next few days, we will be seeing those bikes and the complementary containment of them go live as well. So at the moment, we're essentially where we have always been. There isn't actually anything managing that system. They're just out in the field. But from the next few days, you'll actually see that as a managed scheme. So thanks.
Questions from Councillor Ali?
Thank you, Councillor. I think we're all big fans of e-bikes, broadly speaking, and I think it's welcome that we've got something in place finally. And I think it's a good leveller, like you said, especially for people who've got mobility issues, older residents. I think it's a really good way of getting around. I don't personally use e-bikes. I think they're very heavy and pricey, but I'm sure those who are more fit than I am and more well sort of finance can probably afford to have one. So, but I think it's good to have one anyways. And I think that's my first question, is the money. They are quite pricey, some of these e-bikes, in comparison to, especially the ones that we're looking at going with. And have you thought about any sort of, I won't say concessions, but any sort of ways in order to support people who can't afford the pricier e-bikes to get them into taking out? That's the first question. And the second question is regarding, and it's probably the popular question you're all expecting, is the locations and where they'll be based. And I think one of the things that I was expecting a bit more engagement in terms of where the locations will be. I know there's a commons place, and I know there's been there was a briefing, we're all aware of that, but at the moment what tends to be happening is that there are these boxes popping up, and some places they're in the right places, and at other places they are irrational, quite frankly. They make no sense to why they've been placed at that junction. And I think it would have been good, if you ask me, to engage people far earlier before drawing up these white boxes. We knew we were going to be heading towards a stage eventually of getting a partner. So I just want to sort of express my disappointment in that regard. And then the final point, I think, is in terms of the future going forward. Now we have this common spaces thing, we have the map. There are some very quick wins, and I really want to stress a few locations in our patch, mainly the stadium, to Spurs in particular, and Melly Seven Sisters, although I don't go south of Lordship Lane, but I was there today and it was very, very e-bike friendly, to put it politely. So I think it'd be good to sort of really have a plan, because some of these places are not our land, so TfL roads, maybe private land, redundant parking bays. I think if we use more the road rather than the pavement, unlike what we're having now, is the pavement has been more or less exclusively used, from what I've seen. It's a real shame. So I hope we can move away from that. Thank you.
Yes, please, go ahead.
One thing I would say is that the great thing about e-bikes is that they are, if you like, they're incredibly inclusive. So people who would normally go, I'm not really fit enough to go on a bike, actually, the e-bike is exactly it. And interestingly, in Holland, the highest take-up of e-bikes is with residents between the ages of 65 and 75. Right, so it actually is, that's where its real core business is in Holland, and that's obviously where we've really seen it take off more than anywhere else. In terms of the affordability, this was really important. I'm going to bring in the officers who have been masterminding this in a minute, especially on locations. But on the affordability, one of the early aspects of going out to tender was to look at those social value aspects. So that was really important to us. And where we've put that as sort of an ongoing exploration. So but with Forest, it's sort of built in to a lot of it. So 10 minutes is free. You can go quite a long way with 10 minutes. They also have discount schemes for students, for key workers and things like that. So there's some really good social value aspects, and the team have been negotiating with them, and that's an ongoing thing. In terms of locations, I will say we did have an early engagement. So an engagement about a year ago, actually, where we did put out a common place and ask people where they thought would be a good place for a parking. That wasn't that didn't end the process. And I think, so just so to be clear, that process is ongoing, and the Common Place is going to be relaunched very soon. I'll make sure you all know about it and can feed back in, because I think last time it was maybe a bit misty. We didn't really know what was going on. Now it's live and it's real. I think, and you can see them. I think it's going to really help. As you say, you've got places, and I know pretty much all councillors I've spoken to have said, I know a place where there should be a parking space. So we'll do that. And I'll pass on to officers in terms of, the thinking behind this phase of the parking positions and why some of them might be irrational.
Thank you, Councillor. Murray Situate Transport Planning Manager. Councillor Akata is right. We did launch a common place with suggested locations, and we use some of those in terms of what you're seeing now on the ground. As you said, it's not the end, so we're going to relaunch a common place now. The scheme is live, and we're already getting feedback, and we're already changing some of those parking locations now they're on the ground. So what you're seeing there is an interim location, and the long-term strategy is to actually move them off the pavement and put them in the carriageway. But we need to get some data first to inform where we put them, because obviously there's traffic management order and there's a process. We don't want to get it wrong. But I think what we're going through now in the next year is a learning process and refining the scheme to make sure we have bikes in the right location. I think Councillor Carter mentioned the social value aspect of it, and that weighted very heavily in terms of the tender exercise and how we scored it. Forest does provide better offer in terms of social value and discounts than Lime, and that also includes a reduction in terms of low-income households. And I think what we're looking to do is roll that out right across the borough. Unfortunately, they've got a phased approach compared to Lime, and you will be seeing those benefits in the use of the borough where it's more required, and that's formed a very heavy bit of how we weighted the tenders to choose a supplier. In terms of Spurs, you've mentioned that. We've already had those discussions with Spurs and Alexandra Palace about events and how we manage bikes around events and how we relocate them. And Lime is talking to Spurs directly, and Forest is doing it directly. We also have a meeting, I think, next week to start looking at how we relocate those bikes on the match day, because you've raised that as part of the LAMP, them being at the junction of Lansdowne Road and them causing an issue. So that will be addressed. I'm sure we'll have some teething issues as we work through it, but I'm confident between Spurs and the operators, they will be able to address those issues. But definitely, if you find locations where you think it's not ideal, please let us know. I think we've got an email address, which is Dockless Bikes, haringey.gov.uk. I think we'll circulate that to the committee, and we will look at that in terms of location. Also, as Councillor Carter says, as soon as we go live with the scheme, the common place will go live. And as part of a common place, what we want to find out is where councillors and residents would like additional bikes in location, or if they've got an issue with a particular bike. So also as part of the MOU we're entering into line, if there's a bike that's not part of the commitment, if it's famous, then we expect us to relocate the bike within an hour, and that will be on the website in terms of how you can get in contact with Lime and Forest to make sure. And you can also contact Oliver or myself if you want to actually get it done much quicker.
I have got a few questions, Mike, if you don't mind. If you look on page 36, it says 5.20, the council will monitor the trial scheme and set up monthly meetings with the operators I just want to know who's going to be around the table in relation to when you set up those monthly meetings so that the feedback will be authentic. So I'd just like to know that. That's one question. Do you want all of them at once? Or, right, okay. I'd like to know what the price is and how will people know how to access the concessions? How are you going to put it out there so that the key workers know, as you mentioned, people who's on benefits and perhaps our more aged population? I'd also like to know, where is the council got any forward plan to put in more cycle lanes? Because what I see now is little children on their bikes pedaling in the middle of the road. And as a social worker, I get petrified when I see them. And I'd prefer them to be on the pavement, to be honest with you. But I'd like to see more cycle lanes. And also, the last question is about when people finish their subscription, they just leave it there. I couldn't even get into my house the other day. There was 2 bikes jam up by my door and they're heavy. So I had to ask the neighbour to help me shift them up in order to get in. So I'm just asking about how, because they're all over the place, how we're going to coordinate it getting back in. So these are my questions. Thank you.
Thanks, really good questions. And I'll sort of give a quick, I'll touch on them and then hand over to the officers. But going backwards through them, the dumped bikes, the biggest problem at the moment is that there isn't an agreement. So those bays at the moment are not functioning, so they don't enforce, but they are actually geo-fenced. So once that agreement kicks in the next few days, then if you are within 100 metres, is it? 100 metres of one of those marked bays, you have to park in it. If you don't park in it, you will be fined. Now, where there isn't a marked bay, because obviously one of the keys of this is to be able to come near your house, get a bike and go somewhere, right? So it's going to be cheaper than a taxi, quicker than a bus. You know, it's got all of those benefits and you need that accessibility up to them, but there will then be enforcement on considerately parked bikes. So if there isn't a bay nearby, then we won't enforce, but we will enforce considerate parking. So at the moment, none of that enforcement's happening. So when you see those bikes, literally they're just there. I mean, that's there. You know, so every bike is, even when it's considerately parked in our borough, is dumped at the moment, essentially. We have the team will go. I'll leave it to them to describe. There are quite serious stipulations that we've given those providers in terms of what they do when there are dump bikes and when there are dangerous and obstructive bikes. So they'll go into that. In terms of going backwards directly with you, so it jumps about a bit, but we are at present designing and we'll be going to consultation with more cycle lanes. So protected cycle lanes on those main routes, absolutely essential. And if eventually we do go permanent with the LTNs, then you'll have these large areas which were safe for walking and cycling. And then once you go onto the main roads, you'll be able to join a protected cycle lane. And so we are working on those. And that's kind of in many ways part of the street space team. That's their priority. How will people know about access to concessions? We are going to be doing a lot of comms around this. The providers will be doing a lot of comms, but we will be doing that comms as well. In terms of the price, I think the officers can give you the details on that. I think it's £1 for. It varies between the operators. Yes. Yeah.
That would be great, and the community need to know. So how's the variation? I hope N15 get some good concessions.
It varies between the operators because there's a subscription you can get from both, but I think the forest one is much cheaper in that you get that 10 minutes free first before you actually start getting charged. And with Lime, as soon as you unlock the bike, they charge you an unlocking fee and then a fee per minute or per mile. So what we'll do, we'll send you a comparison table because we've got one that we've done anyway as part of the tendering exercise for the cost.
Coming on that point, because I've tested, at the moment, obviously, there's only Lime bikes around, but I've gone from my house to, which is in Seven Sisters, Tiverton, over to the office in Alex's house. And it took just a little over 10 minutes. So on a forest bike, almost that entire journey will be free, right? So I mean, that's a really good standard that they've got. But when I've done it on the Lime bike, it's cost me around, including the unlocking, about £3.80, which I thought, okay, it's more expensive than a bus, but I got there a lot quicker. And of course, I went door to door. So it's a lot cheaper than a taxi, right? And you get a bit of exercise, and it's actually really fun.
Well, Mike, you better go faster on the forest bike, yeah? To make sure you get there on time. And I'm just asking another question, fall back on that. Why are we using the Lime bikes if the forest bike is more effective and cheaper? Why are we going with Lime?
I think when we did the tendering exercise, we went out to 4 suppliers, and I think Lime scored second and Forest scored first. But in order to offer our residents that option in terms of connectivity and trips and existing subscription. We've gone for both supplies, so you get the best of both worlds, because some residents do prefer the Lime bikes over the Forest bike, although the Forest bike is cheaper. But what you get is best of both worlds, where you get a cheaper option and you get more social value out of one, and then you get this kind of in between a bus and a taxi fare, where you can go all the way down to central London or neighbouring boroughs as participate in Lime. Because once you've got an Uber app, you essentially have access to Lime, so it's much easier. Some people like that convenience where they don't have to download a second app and they just use their Uber app to unlock the bikes.
Okay, thank you. Have you got any questions?
Sorry, Chair, could I just add something just to that point, which is that Lime is all over the place. So that's why a lot of people do like Lime, because you can go, you with Forest, you can't go everywhere, yet, but with Lime you can, so.
I think I've got 3 questions. I don't know who out of the 3 musketeers put their hand up first. So, Councillor, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, firstly, really pleased to see this being moved forward. Secondly, to your point, Mike, I got fined on Saturday actually because I didn't realise they didn't currently extend into Haringey or beyond Stroud Green anyway. Just back onto cost. I remember when Lime Bike kind of first arrived in London, they were free for 10 minutes and relatively cheap, and had gradually kind of retracted some of that. I'm just wondering what commitment we have from Forest Bike to kind of maintain that cheaper period, and also the 10 minutes and all of that.
Can't say that.
You could have. I mean, it's pretty much within the agreement and the tender that we received for the next 24 months. I can't say anything after the 24 months. For the 24 months in terms of what they've submitted, that's what they'll need to sign up to. And any change in terms of those costs and conditions will have to be in writing by the council, and will have to go through Councillor Carter and the directors. So I don't think you can just hike the price or change it.
And just on the Forest, that sort of discount. So that discount, it comes about because it's subsidised by sort of partner sort of companies and organisations that charities they partner with. So I'd like to think that that's something that would, if anything, sort of only grow and strengthen rather than sort of recede over time. I think given the fact that it's something that's very recognisable, gets a lot of good PR for them, I think it would be a bit of an own goal for them, from their perspective, to lose that anyway. So I don't think it's something that they'd lose lightly. So we'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, as Marisa said, kind of we've got far better arrangements with them now. So hopefully with things moving forward and sort of more usage, we've got more of a kind of a say over how things go looking forward.
Councillor Carroll and then Ian.
Yeah, thank you guys for presenting. My experience from other boroughs has been that the rollout of these bikes has sometimes created tension in certain communities around access to the pavement, right? So I think the success of the rollout will ultimately hinge on how well we can respond when there are blockages on pavement. And I'm heartened by the fact that you've got Lime to commit to getting it within an hour, but a lot of that success will hinge on how well people know to report them, and if there's anything we can do in terms of strengthening I know Lime rolled out that you have to take a photo of where you've parked it, but ultimately the photo doesn't tell you very much about actually how much it's blocking the pavement, from my own personal experience. Sort of 2 facets to that. Is there anything we've got in mind in terms of like getting the word out to people, being like, 2 sides of things, we've invited them into the borough, but we really want you to make sure that they're holding up their side of the bargain. And then also, because I think there are specific, people who use wheelchairs or have buggies really will see these things and have in other boroughs, like Wandsworth, where I used to work. The Wandsworth Council ended up impounding like 40 or 50 Lime bikes because it was just becoming such a persistent issue. It became an issue in all of their councillors' lives, basically. They got to that point. And obviously, I'm just conscious that I don't want us to get into that position. I think you guys are taking steps in there, but in terms of getting that knowledge out there, because it became something that got landed repeatedly on councillors' desks because they didn't know where to go with the issues with the block pavements. And then just a second one, which is that, and I've looked at the map, there's a large part of Alexandra Park which would be not covered by any of the 100-metre zones. So you would have potential for lots of bikes to end up in the 100-metre within the park, which I imagine would cause significant issue. I just think if you've got any plans or obviously roll out, yeah, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So I apologize, I didn't introduce myself. Oliver Pudden, I work within the transport planning team. On your second point, so as part of our arrangement with, or agreements rather, with the operators, parking isn't permitted in park spaces. Obviously, it's still kind of reliant on people adhering to that. Obviously, people may still do that. Hopefully, the deterrents such as fines and potentially being banned will stop that. And then, if there are any issues, that we can respond to those on a sort of a case-by-case basis. Your first point regarding sort of obstructions and sort of how that impacts certain sort of residents and certain sort of members of the community. We're obviously fully aware of that. It is something that is one of the bigger issues and considerations with this. As part of our initial sort of engagement, we did meet with the Joint Partnership Board a couple of times. So we presented to them, we've heard from them. We tried to sort of take those findings and their feedback on board, particularly with where we've been locating some of the parking bays, and just generally that sort of our overall approach. In terms of kind of how we sort of respond to any issues with that and reporting, the details for directly reporting will be on both the sort of dedicated dockless page on the council website, again, which we can share, along with our commonplace page. So that can be reported either directly by email, through the app, there's a telephone line. Failing that, if there are kind of persistent issues, then obviously that's, I think, when we'd seek residents, councillors to actually speak to us, so we can bring that up as a, you know, if there's a recurring theme that's going on with the bikes. Yeah, so I think in first instances, the quickest response would be to speak directly to the operators. If that's not working, and I think at this level, obviously, if you can speak to us and we can highlight that there are levels, that there are issues, and it's, you know, we're hearing from yourselves, then that sort of heightens those issues, and I'd like to think that would expedite a response from them. But yeah, like I said, those details will be available to the public. I had a meeting today with our comms colleagues about just how we kind of how we publicise the sort of parking approach and reporting. So, and that is part of it. So hopefully that will help things moving forward as well.
Thank you very much. Ian Sygrave, and then a little question, a very little one from Councillor Ali.
Thank you, Chair. One question and one observation. The question is that you've mentioned that the scheme is going to go live shortly and soon and various other phrases. Presumably that means you haven't yet got a date. So hopefully when you do have a date, it will be widely publicised so that we're all very much aware of it, because I know some residents are sort of believing that it has already gone live, and so clearly there's some confusion. So a clear and well publicised announcement would be welcome. And the other, more of an observation, I'm delighted to hear that residents in Holland aged between 65 and 75 are getting on their bikes. As somebody who falls in the middle of that particular demographic, hard to believe, I know, I have to say that I rather share the fears that the chair mentioned. The thought of myself getting on one of these bicycles and proceeding along Green Lanes or Whiteman Road is absolutely terrifying. And I'm afraid at the moment the traffic conditions are such that nothing would entice me onto it.
Well, I mean, I look forward to the day when we can go on a e-bike ride together, Ian. Hopefully up Green Lanes, and a much safer one. So we are working on that. As you know, we've spoken about it. I mean, I think you are right. You know, as the chair said earlier, we need the infrastructure. So in order to really get it so that it's open for those people who would be, you know, looking at those roads as a, you know, serious threat to life, which they are, right? You know, that is, you know, it is going to be a disincentive. And actually, I'm pleased that as we go into the spring and summer, we'll still be in the trials of those LTNs, which are going to really help people be able to get around much more safely in the centre of our borough. So, but I absolutely agree. We need the improved infrastructure. Our teams are working on that, and it's a real priority. However, there are still, as we've seen in other boroughs, and as Councillor Carroll pointed out, they are incredibly successful. Right. And yes, I mean, we talk about Holland, and I think we're not quite there, obviously, as a nation in terms of cycling. But I think we are seeing that mode shift. I mean, something like 1.2 million cycle rides a day in London now. Right. I mean, on average, this is enormous change to where we were even 5 years ago. So I think we are going to see these. I think in terms of the live aspect, I think you're right. There has probably been a bit of a grey area because we had to put in those marked bays first, and that was one of the things that we wanted to do as part of our Haringey approach, is to say we're not going to just put them out there and then start putting the bays. We want the bays there first. But as soon as you've got the bays and you see some bikes lined up, you go, okay, it's live. And it is true, we did enable, especially Lyme, to start deploying bikes. They had already been here, remember, unmanaged. So we were like, okay, you can now deploy them, and obviously some of them were putting them in those bays. But once we go live, there will be announcement. I think when I say maybe, I am being a bit vague, but you might be actually able to be more exact. But I think we are talking this week, and there will be a fanfare, and I think we're going to know.
Yeah, just on that. So we've had there were some unforeseen sort of challenges and some questions regarding sort of the signing of the agreements rather with the operators, which has meant that this has been a bit of a slower process. But we're hoping by Thursday that press release would go out. The Commonplace website that's been refreshed would go live again. The council website would be again updated, and so that would all coincide and go out together. As Councillor Carter has mentioned, the bikes are already here. We've kind of had to put the bays in and the infrastructure in earlier, just so that was kind of there in the first instance. I think one of the main sort of areas of confusion is the fact that there is a kind of a patchwork of how these bikes operate across London and across the UK. That mainly is because there is no legislation or regulation of them. So the e-scooters have their own set of regulations. They are operating under a trial that the DFT has put in. These bikes, though, fall outside of that, so they, in theory, can operate without any permission anywhere. There is, unfortunately, not really anything that can be done if you don't support them. So what we are trying to do is manage that, and we now have fostered better relations with those companies. There probably will be some hiccups on the way, but I think that's what we're trying to put in place, is the fact there is a reporting structure and the information, those details for residents and yourselves to sort of speak to them directly if need be, or to escalate it directly to us, and we can sort of escalate that further. But yeah, as Councillor Carter has mentioned, we will be making sure that press release is out, is clear, and the information that residents and yourself need, is readily available.
Thank you. I believe, Mike, you wanted to come in to say something?
Yeah, just a really quick one, just to say that I think, just to underline Oliver's point, which is we are going to need, that information sharing, and that is going to be really important to us. So absolutely, we're going to be depending on community and councillors to be feeding back as much as possible. I'm going to be arranging walkabouts in the various wards in a few weeks, especially if you want that and you really want to show hopefully how it's working. But we know there are going to be hiccups, there are going to be things that aren't working right, and we want to make sure that we can get it right. And we have got a very good relationship with both providers at the moment, and I think they will be trying their hardest to make sure that these are successful.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ali, quick.
Yeah, just to restate the point, not only after the fanfare and the press release, but I think there needs to be regular comms to residents as to how to report. I think that's really important. It can't just be a sort of a flash in the bang and then we've done it and it's live and high-fiving each other. I think it kind of needs to be very clear, a cyclical social media campaign just to remind people like you would anything else. The question I had is a resource question. Are you confident that your team's got all the resources that they need? Because I'm quite aware that this team is quite small and deliver a lot of schemes. And I think one of the criticisms that I had of the LTNs when they were first rolled out in my ward was the volume of inquiries from the public and from members was so significant, so dramatic, you say, that there wasn't enough response time to sort of churn through them. So I'm just sort of questioning if all the resources in place, you're confident that your team have everything that they need to do their jobs to respond swiftly. Thank you.
Well, one thing is these are very different to the LTNs in many, many ways, but one of them is that the direct line for alerting, badly parked bikes is the providers themselves. So they've got the resources, and I think our team is confident that they do. So the comms that we need to do around that is about making sure that people understand where they need to report and how they need to report, but it is to those providers, and we've been given reassurances that they do have those resources.
Yeah, just to echo that, we've had those reassurances whenever, even at this stage, some of the things that we've brought up directly with them, they've responded to very quickly, which has been positive. When I've just been walking around kind of more locally around here, I've noticed that where there were issues or areas where there have been issues, that they seem to have been responded to. But yeah, it will just need some ongoing, information sharing amongst this sort of group and beyond that. I thought it was also just pertinent just to add toward the end of this, that there are emerging proposals for a single micromobility contract that would cover the whole of London. Those are being discussed sort of at TfL, London Council, and sort of including this council at sort of level. That may create sort of a far more consistent approach to how e-bikes and potentially e-scooters as well, depending on their classification by the DFT, how that looks in the sort of next year or so. So that is something that we will be seeking feedback from going forward, because that may help with kind of issues around parking, obstructions, and just general sort of confusion. Hopefully that will make things a lot clearer, and this is a far more viable option for transport going forward.
Thank you very much. Can we agree the recommendations? The recommendations are on page 31, and they are point 2, which says the panel notes the contents of the report for the information. So can we agree the recommendations? Agreed? Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, Mike. You're released. And your thing. And then we are going to swiftly move on to antisocial behaviour, ABS overview. That's on page 9 to 16. So can the officer please present the report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this I'm presenting from the presentation. I don't know where it is in the pack. Page 9, thank you. So I'm on slide 2 of that presentation. I'm literally just going to run you through some of the key headlines. Haringey, as you can see, has the 12th highest volume of ASB in London. We make up around 5% of the total volume of ASB in London, which is around 250,000 incidents certainly during the last year. So we're currently running at about 10,000 for the borough, which is about 18% above the London average. So we do have an issue with ASB. This is mostly concentrated in and around the east wards of the borough. And there's no surprise there that this is linked to kind of the areas where we see the most social deprivation, high density housing, etc. As you can see on one of the slides, Bruce Castle features as one of the highest volume hotspots. The reason for this is because of the high density housing in that area, and most of the ASB reports that you're seeing, most of the data that you're seeing here is based on reports to the police, not necessarily to the council ASB team. Most of the ASB issues are linked to rowdy or inconsiderate behaviour. So often people think it's crime or drug dealing, but mostly it's just people being loud, noisy, obnoxious. But we do have particular hotspots in the borough where we do see those issues, and we're not kind of backing away from those. And generally, what we do see is an increase in ASB during the summer months. So, for example, May, June and September seem to feature as the highest volume months, and for obvious reasons, because the weather's better, there's more people out and about. And we often see lower levels which is probably logical in the winter months, especially after Christmas or January, February time. I'm just going to hand over to Brian now, just to quickly go through some of them.
Evening, Brian Ellick, Head of Antisocial Behaviour and Enforcement. So with all the things Joe said, we have the strategy that we've just spoken about that feeds into tackling a lot of these issues that are highlighted in some of the worst locations in the East. And we rely quite heavily on our resources around CCTV and how we work with partners to identify those hotspots and feed into some of the solutions that we can employ to tackle some of those problems Joe's mentioned. We work really closely with the police. There is, as we've mentioned, the reporting element that we want to emphasise and ensure that residents know how to report issues. But we are very keen and very driven on partnership work. We understand that as much as a lot of the issues that are reported are low level, there are a number of factors that contribute to those issues. So working in partnership with our colleagues is particularly key. You can see in the slides there some of the outcomes and some of the incidents that are captured that enables us to take enforcement action from our CCTV. We've got a programme currently underway where we're doubling the amount of cameras that are on the street at the moment. We started a programme back in 2022 where we invested quite substantial into our infrastructure and CCTV control room. We've got a brand new CCTV control room. The police use that control room regularly. We have a number of operations that are undertaken from that control room. And a lot of the work around CCTV is effectively channeled through the partnership problem-solving group, which is co-chaired by the council and the police, which has a number of partners across the table from housing, mental health, adults, and that's kind of the core forum which informs where we put those cameras and how we deliver our enforcement activity.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Ali. I've also got Councillor Amadou. She put her hand up first. So Councillor Amadou, please can you ask your question and then we'll move on to Councillor Ali. Thank you. Time for questions, everyone.
Thank you very much. For officers who are not aware, I'm a councillor for Haringey, and if you look at page 12, you could see, my God, it's very dark colours indeed, indicating that's one of the high areas of antisocial behaviour. But I honestly don't need to see this to know, because we have, as councillors, we have so many emails about antisocial behaviour having you wouldn't, well, you should believe it, because I'm sure you know about some of them. Everything, we have everything from bad neighbours to drugs to very loud music, you name it, there isn't anything we don't have in Haringey. And my question is this, it seems to the ordinary person, it seems that the council is very slow to react. So my question is, do we have enough staff to be able to deal with this? Do you actually target specific areas where you know the most the problems are? Because it seems like some of the services are very slow, and when I have to tell something that comes to my surgery, for instance, that she has to keep a diary about the noise and the social behavior. She's an old woman, Turkish woman. She can't do that. She finds difficulties. Her daughter rings all the time, but nothing seems to happen. This is what they're telling me, by the way. So the question
Councillor Amadou, you need to be specific about what question you're asking, because because sometimes it's quite fuzzy and we can't really hear it. So
Right.
can you have a list of the questions you would like to answer the panel, please? Thank you.
First of all, my name is Adamu, A-D, like Adam, A-D-A-M-O-U. Questions. Do you have enough resources in the service? Do you target specific areas where you get most complaints for? For instance, Haringey ward is my ward, and is one of the highest. If you look at the map on page 12, it's one of the a lot of complaints come from Haringey ward. So really, and the feeling of the residents is that the council is too slow or doesn't care, and they're not dealing with it. This is what people tell me when they come to see me. So I will appreciate any response. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Amadou. Can I hand it over to the?
Yeah,
is it you, Adam, that's answering?
Thanks very much. Just Councillor Adamu, just two relatively quick answers. Firstly, you can always have more staff to help you get things sorted. The nature of the financial situation we find ourselves in is such that difficult decisions have been taken well before I certainly was in this role, but there is an acknowledgement from the leader down that ASB is a real priority area, and you will see in the coming weeks and months a real focus on making sure we get that sorted. And when I say get that sorted, by that I mean our approach to setting out exactly the kind of responses to which you just refer. And I started scribbling down the second answer. And I can't. Oh yes, just to say, when you look at the data on page 4 of the pack, just to be clear, that's the data of incidences reported to the police rather than us. So that provides context for the numbers. It wouldn't, was it 12,000? You said, I think. Haringey ward. 664. Right. So that would obviously not. If those figures were coming to council, there'd be a serious epidemic of proportions that we obviously wouldn't want to see. But that is data that the police have provided of reports that they've received. So that's why it looks bigger than it would otherwise do. But your wider point about people feeling that we don't. That the council doesn't care, that's concerning to hear. That's obviously not the approach. There's a small team, but it's a team that takes these issues seriously. And if there are particular points you'd like to raise with us, then please let's have that conversation separately. But through you, Councillor Adamu, no one should feel that people don't care, because that's not true.
Thank you very much. Is it Councillor Ali next?
Thank you, Chair. So if you allow me, because I think the ward that's listed as the highest is in my ward, and I have to admit I was quite surprised, because if you look at the figures last year, and I actually did raise this last year because they were on the old boundaries. I did suggest that when you get on the new boundaries, what you'll find is the bit of my ward that was Northumberland Park is disproportionately represented compared to where I live in the ward, which is the old White Hart Lane bit. So I think it would be good for ward council to have some sort of hot spots and in terms of what type of ASB, because one of the things that my residents tell me ad nauseum that they are constantly reporting, but there is a perception, not my view personally, just to be clear, there's a perception that the police take ASB seriously in the Gardens, in the Ladder, in Stroud Green, far more seriously than they take in Tottenham. And the assumption is it's the east of the borough, you tend to have denser housing, tend to have more deprivation, quell a surprise, essentially. And I think what I would like to see is a sense of seriousness from the police, because the challenge is, from the council corporate ASB team, who I've worked with, lovely, really committed, proactive, really going out of their way in terms of working with members, that some of them are grouped in very challenging wards. So what tends to happen is their volume of work, if you're giving 2 corporate ASB officers, Northumberland Park, Tottenham Hale, Tottenham Central, Bruce Castle, what do you expect? As opposed to someone who's got, a different part of the borough. So I think there are issues about how do we use our limited resources, because I accept that these things happened quite a long time ago, and had we had a chance again, it might not happen this way. But we are where we are, and I think it's a case of really rethinking that again, because I do think that is a real pressure on the wards, on the officers, etc., etc. That's one point I really want to restate emphatically. The issue I wanted to actually get to was when we come to the the figures, it'd be good to get a year-by-year comparison in the future, so we can actually see what it compares to. Now, I know that's not the case because we had new ward boundaries, so therefore the data from last year will be as accurate, so just for the future. But one thing I do want to sort of question is distinction of what type of ASB we're talking about, because I know there might be residents in a ward, should we say, that will think that someone's smoking some drugs is there a form of ASB, and they'll report it as a form of ASB. But people in other parts of the borough where that might be culturally accepted or it's a commonplace issue, but they have serious violence, for example, or threats of life, that kind of thing. So I think what I'm trying to get is that how do you distill the severity of ASB? Because there's different types of ASB, from noise nuisance all the way to violence. And I think that's my real bugbear. And I can't tell you how many times I get this challenge every single time. The police are only interested in going after drug offences, low-level drug offences, on the ladder, in the gardens, in Stroud Green. They have no interest in anything in Tottenham High Road. I get that over and over again. And I think that's the kind of challenge I think we'd like us to sort of put to the police. I know the SNT are trying, which we haven't had for 2 years, by the way, until the other day, but it's just not enough. And I think that perception is really, I can't tell you how strongly rooted it is in Tottenham. It really is. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. A few things here. Firstly, I think we have to be ever so gently careful about repeating your description of the perception. Just because I think what we need to try and do is be objective as possible and make sure that we reassure people rather than just repeat. So your point that people think they don't care and they're not interested in it, it's its own thing. Perception, agreed, may be the case, but I think we just have to be a bit careful about repeating that, because that's not the case. So we need to reassure people both through deeds and words that it's not the case, rather than just repeating.
Well,
can I just finish?
The fact that the reporting is quite good in my ward shows that they do care. I think the challenge is that they want to see the resources allocated to that ward. Why isn't that happening? That's the part trying to get across, but I agree with you.
Sure, just temper language is important, because that's the best way, and I'm not trying to speak to you.
No, I know. You're making a very fair point. Sorry.
I just think that's important. Secondly, hear your point around the year-on-year data, and we can make sure we'll just make sure that's passed on to the crew. Oh yeah, sorry, I'm looking up here. My next note's here. It's an interesting point to raise about how and where do people report what is or may not be, what is serious, what is less serious. If it's noise, of course, that's council. If it's serious violence, and I think you use the word violence, that's a police matter. And, you know, our ASB team are not going to be able to go out there and tackle a violent incident, nor should they be expected to. That's a police matter, and you need to make sure through you to whoever has raised that point with you, that they recognise that's criminality. It's not antisocial, if you know what I mean. And of course, there's a range of what starts as an annoying neighbour whose tree goes over into your garden to more serious forms, of course. But I think the point that we have taken away from your questioning is perhaps taking a look at how we can improve the knowledge and the structures around reporting and what we do to reassure people the best way to do that. Because the worst thing is someone calling the wrong people. So, you know, your friend's got Bob Marley on really late at night, very good tune, plenty of them, or, you know, Barry Manilow or whatever. That's different. You don't call the police for that. That's a noise team if that's persistent. If there's a violent incident to which you referred, that's a police matter. You're not going to call the council for that, if you know what I mean. And it's about, because if you can improve the speed and relevance of your inquiry, you could probably help tackle some of that perception to which you referred. I should also say, if people are talking to you as councillors about these issues, get them into members' inquiry every time something's raised with you. Make sure you speak to whoever the relevant cabinet member is, whether it's WhatsApp, which I know Councillor Dunstall's done today, and we should hopefully have a briefing for you for tomorrow, and just help raise the awareness and make sure people know, because if the politicians and the stakeholders also know some of these challenges and these trends, you can make sure that we hold the officers and the police to account too. But yeah, important questions, and I think just to be very, very clear, there is a real recognition that making sure the responses to ASB are as effective as possible. The leader talked about it earlier today. There's conversations between different cabinet members about the housing element, because a lot of ASB takes place on estates and what that relationship looks like. So it's not just as simple as saying, you know, you're bad, I'm going to moan at you. There's to make sure we get to the right place where we can effectively challenge some of this stuff. It does require the onion and taking some of the layers off to get to the well, onions don't have cores, but you know what I mean, to get to the centre and the root of the problem. But there's a real recognition that needs to be done, and it's a priority.
I've got some questions, but I think that
just to say, I'm meant to be at a residents' meeting at 8 o'clock, so.
Okay, so there's just two questions,
yeah.
And it's going to be really quick. So the one that I want to ask is the demographic of the ASBs, the people, the perpetrators. Do we have in this report? Because
do we have the demographic of people?
Do we have the demographic, the ages? Okay, because I think that's really important, because that will feed into where there's a need.
Sorry, Chair, just to say that this is police data. I'm not sure whether this is available from the police. I don't think it is available. So
we can ask.
This is abstracted from police databases, so it's only what information is available, but we can check.
Yeah, you can ask the police for that, because that feeds into giving us a more drilled down information about where it's coming from. And I echo what Councillor Ali said about the priority of how the response is, because there's certain parts of N15 I walk around, I feel like I'm in Bob Marley's funeral, because I can smell the ganja, but nobody's coming out for that, you know. And it has been reported, because the residents come and tell me that, but it's not perhaps a priority, or you know, the impetus to act on that is perhaps less than other parts of the borough. So it'd be really helpful if we had the demographic of what the ASB is and the concentrate, because we have got the list here on page 12, the population and the amount. So it'd be really good to help, because Councillor Jogi did say a lot of it happens on the estates. And I'm looking at it from a social work perspective, because I am a social worker. And from my experience of working, sometimes when the youth don't have anything to do, they get into mischievous things, and perhaps it's just out of boredom. And that's where they're groomed a lot, and lots of things happen, and that feeds into the narrative of the antisocial behavior. Because I think if we had that information, that will feed into the need and how we develop our services to stem what is actually coming out, and is quite prolific in these areas of Bruce Grove and Knoll Park. So that's my only question. I know that.
Yeah, can I just come back on that? I mean, so I hear you to a point. I mean, if you look at the figures, Bruce Grove will be and is a major Bruce Castle, sorry. Well, no, Bruce Grove area, I think was the point raised. Thank you very much. And that's a major transport hub, right? So you've got the train station, and quite like if you look at the table, Stroud Green, I think is midway down. You've got Finsbury Park. So there are factors where, and you know, you're right, you can say about the demographics of people, but I think that will only get us so far, because someone zooms in on the tube, does their thing, zooms out again, where they're from is irrelevant. So I just think it's a slightly more complicated picture, which I think speaks also to why it's important we take the time and conscious, not leaving it to gather dust, but to take the time in a sensible way to make sure you get it right. And yes, I think I'll stop there.
Okay, I'm aware that you have to go at 8 o'clock, and I think we all do, really, a bit quicker. But do you had a question, Councillor Dunstan?
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, Councillor Ali would challenge the comments about Stroud Green.
My residence or my comment.
But I think one of the issues, coming back to the police point on this, I think, is that, you know, where we're certainly speaking for Stroud Green, where we've had conversations with the SNT, they say we have these SNT officers, they are on the streets 2.5 days a week. Oh, something's happened elsewhere in the borough. They've not done their 2.5 days in Stroud Green. So that is an issue, and one which we as a council cannot resolve. But what I wanted to point out was, or make a suggestion, I should say, is residents that come to me who are lodging complaints via the council portal will frequently say, I just don't hear anything back. Now, understand the capacity pressures and all of that stuff, but I just wonder whether we need to look at the I've just looked at it now, forgive my ignorance, it's the first time I've done it, but whether we need to think about what we're telling people we will aim to do. So we say we aim to assess within 24 hours, and we aim to contact you if we can do something within 5 working days. I don't know whether you have any stats on whether we're achieving that or whether we are achieving it, but just anecdotally, I think often, and this goes for a lot of the council work, not just this, people just get most frustrated when they feel like they're sending correspondence into the black hole and not getting anything back. If you tell them it's going to be 3 weeks before they get a response, a lot of people are like, okay, fine. It's the not knowing, and that creates a lot of feedback for us. But just a comment, I suppose.
Yeah, no, thank you for that comment. It does speak to the point I raised earlier about reporting fatigue, and I totally understand that. You know, there's nothing worse than banging your head against a wall and saying, can you hear me? Understand my frustrations, my thoughts, my experiences, and not feeling you get something back. We will take away and look at what we can do to improve the acknowledgement process. I mean, there's probably a conversation to have with Seema Chandwani about reaction. We'll make sure there's an update brought to the next meeting, whenever that is. When is that? Probably the next municipal year now, isn't it? Yeah. So none of us may be here, but all at the hands of the Almighty. But well, you're the constants. We're the variables. You'll be here, officers, thankfully. Yeah, you serve at the pleasure of the leader. And then also we'll look at the stats, and I'll speak to officers and we'll see, but we'll make sure the stats, and also look at improving the response process too.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you're out of time, to be honest. Can I say that, do we agree to recommendations? Agreed? Okay, thank you very much. Right, the next thing on the agenda is item 10, which is the work programme update. There is no update for the work programme, and item 11 is new item agendas for urgent business. There are no new items for urgent business, and the dates, item 12 is the dates for the future meetings. The next meeting of the Climate, Community Safety and Culture Panel will be on Tuesday, the 25th of June 2024. This date will need to be confirmed at full council in March. I now declare this meeting is closed, and the time is now, what time is it? 7 minutes past 8. Thank you very much for everyone for your attendance. It's really appreciated. Thank you. Bye-bye.